broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Houston, Texas. It's time for Houston Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
Hello, Houston. Trisha Stetzel here, bringing you another episode of Houston Business Radio Beyond the Uniform series. Today's guest is James Castleberry, founder of Castleberry Coaching and Consulting and CEO of LeaderEI. James helps organizations achieve measurable results through consulting, training, and executive coaching rooted in proven emotional intelligence strategies. That's what the EI stands for, just in case you were curious. He is a retired U.S. Naval officer with over 25 years of leadership experience across military, government, and corporate sectors. He's led initiatives for NATO, U.S. federal agencies, and private companies alike. I'm not done, James. I'm almost there. James is a master trainer in the EQI 2.0 and EQ 360 assessments, and his work blends research-backed tools with practical insights to help leaders boost performance, strengthen teams, and build emotionally intelligent cultures that retain top talent. I can't wait to have this conversation. James, welcome to the show.
Hi, Trisha. Thank you so much. Excited to be here today. It's lovely to be here with you. And I love the work that you do and how you help veterans and business owners alike. So it's really great to be here with you.
Thank you. So we need to know a little bit more about James and how you found this space in emotional intelligence and what really drew you to build this business.
Well, it was quite an evolution. And when I retired from the military, I was an intelligence officer for over 20 years. I started out enlisted actually in submarines, but gained my commission and then became an intelligence officer. So I transitioned from U.S. Special Operations Command and went to work as an organizational development specialist within a healthcare organization. And it was the first time I've been an individual contributor in quite a long time. But I kind of backed into this laboratory of consulting and coaching in the middle of COVID. And so when I say a high pressure lab, that's what I mean is that, okay, you are becoming a consultant. I was hired to help with leadership development programs. And so that was based on leadership in the military. And so I come in and then I realized I was much more of a mentor than a coach. I had to develop that curiosity and ability to listen. Shut up, James, listen. So I had to learn that, the most important in coaching. And then I developed such a heart for those folks in healthcare that were going through what they were going through. And the primary tool that we used was emotional intelligence to raise that self-awareness so that we could understand what challenges they have, where their strengths were, what blind spots were out there. And what I specifically liked about the tool that we used was that unlike some of the other tools that are out there that are like personality type indicators, they kind of tell you what you are. You know, what I think is that raise your hand if you know what letters you are. And people will do that, or they'll drop them in a chat or a webinar and that they know their letters. But we were kind of left there. You're purple, you're orange, you're pink. But where's the growth in that? Where's the development? How does that help? You may understand more about yourself, but are you able to grow from that? And so emotional intelligence during COVID placed me in a position to help people that were really going through their own kind of trauma they hadn't seen before. You know, I likened it to combat. We deploy and we go there and we see things that we're not used to. And then we come back and we kind of work through our issues. For them during COVID, what I experienced was that they were returning to trauma every day. And so when we would have our coaching sessions and those who participated in the leader development programs, it was a break for them. I could never schedule a 30-minute call. It was an hour. It'd take 30 minutes for them to just kind of decompress and feel safe and psychologically safe environment. And so some of that involved just decompressing a little and then getting into what challenges they were facing and using emotional intelligence to better understand themselves and where we could grow and develop. And so all of that led to, while I was there, establishing my own business, initially focused on helping veterans transition
Mm.
because I had such a heart for veterans. You don't have a 30-year career without having a heart for veterans, and so I did, and helped. And then I transitioned that a little bit to focus on the corporate world, where I had the opportunity to go in and work with organizations going through change. I did some work with major defense companies, some an AI startup. I even had the opportunity to work with, and so learned a lot about consulting, transformation, change, and all along using what I learned about emotional intelligence in that 2.5 year lab of COVID and healthcare to help these other organizations. And so that was the foundation of my business, and it's brought it to where I am today, where I like to certify other people in emotional intelligence tools. And so whether that's individual coaches and consultants, or if it's their leader development team that's internal. I feel that there's such a great exponential impact that I can have that way. And so I really like helping out with those tools. I can still do the same things myself, but I see this exponential impact when I can certify others in these great tools so that they can help people too. And so that's kind of brought me to where I am today.
Fantastic story. So, do you find that everyone's on board and understands EI and EQ and all of the things that you and I are talking about, or is it something you have to educate people on?
Yeah, I absolutely have to educate people. And then there are some that you meet, and it's interesting, generationally, it's different. So if I'm talking to someone in business and they're baby boomer, they will respond differently because their generation, showing emotion was bad, right? So they have a bias against those kind of things. Even Gen X folks like me, they all think it's the newest fad. Yeah, yeah. We all know our MBTI letters, right? So yeah, we had that. That was great. HR did it. Now we're back to business. And so there is some of that. Now, what's interesting about when we get through millennials and Gen Z, millennials, it's fascinating the way that they look at emotional intelligence because they so believe in the work environment being good for them. And so that the culture is very important to millennials.
Yeah.
And then when you get to Gen Z, who are now in the workforce and working, and you think about a leader facing all of these different personalities on a daily basis. We've used code switching in different contexts, but think about emotionally intelligent code switching between generations required of leaders. And so we get to Gen Z, and these folks are very open. They may come in and sit down in your office and tell you what their therapist said. And now think about the communication among all these different generations together. So yeah, absolutely. It depends on who I'm talking to. Can I sell emotional intelligence as something that benefits the organizations? And we can bring statistics, we can bring data, we can show increases in collaboration that can result in increased sales and achieving sales goals. We can show the difference in the impact to retention. We can show the difference in missed days and ramp up time and training. So we can provide all the data behind that. Um, it- but it depends on who the audience. You have to adjust that story to whoever the audience is. And sometimes it's easier to talk to them about it. They say, yeah, we need to do that. We see the value in it. And then sometimes there's an overall perception, even of HR as a cost center and not a profit center, that can create a bias when you're having those conversations. And so, you know, is everyone receptive initially? No, I'm not receptive to sales initially. Don't pop in my inbox if I don't know you and try to sell me something, right? So, every person is different. I think that's why emotional intelligence is so important. The number one blind spot for leaders is self-awareness.
Mm.
We see the results of our actions and the way that we interact with people. But there's a lack of self-awareness. One of the most heartbreaking things that I see is people who are terminated for some behavior. You see, performance is not usually, unless you're at the C-suite level, performance is not usually the reason that people are fired and terminated. It's usually some behavior. And they usually don't see it coming because some of those behaviors, when they were more junior in organizations, resulted in performance results.
Yeah.
So they don't understand. The Navy does a great job of putting it on the front of Navy Times is this commanding officer was relieved. And then you wonder, well, how aware was that person? Performance evaluations were great. They promoted to be a commander, right? So their feedback they were receiving, at least from up above, was great. So yeah, I think that blind spot of self-awareness, and that's in every interaction. Are you communicating the way that, even in sales, the way that they need to hear it? Are they a direct, compassionate, spirited, or systematic communicator, right? And then how does that communication style interplay with emotional intelligence? Are you framing your message right for who's receiving it? And so emotional intelligence impacts all of that.
Yeah. Wow. So, um, tell it for those who don't actually know about EQ and EI and why we're using those synonymously. So let's talk about that first, and then let's talk about what the diagnostic or the assessment, the EQ I 2.0, what does it actually measure so that we can catch people up who may not be familiar?
Okay. So I think EI became popularized in the late 90s. There was a book by psychologist Daniel Goleman, and it was called Emotional Intelligence. And so it's when people first heard of it. But even the research before that, people started wondering, when you look at highly successful people, and this is what drove it, but when you look at highly successful people, they didn't all have very high IQs.
Mm.
And that had been the gold standard for measuring how, and predicting how successful people were going to be. So these researchers became very curious as to what's that other intelligence that they're employing, right, to be this successful, because they don't all have the same IQ. And then even people with very high IQs might not be that successful. Maybe that's detrimental to their success. So when people started researching that, and then Goldman's book came out, was highly successful, and then it kind of grew out of that, just raising awareness, and different assessments came from that. The EQI 2.0 came from the initial work from Reuven Bar-On, who's an Israeli researcher, and there was an initial EQI, and then the way that the data was presented was changed in EQI 2.0. But basically, just as IQ is a measure of cognitive intelligence, EI is a measure, and what the EQI gives you is a measure of emotional intelligence. And so whatever your score is, it's just like your IQ score, except it's an emotional intelligence score. And so the assessment serves as a baseline, and it collects data. They had a very good norm. It's valid, reliable. We'll talk about sometimes different psychometric tests and the standards that they have to meet for validity and reliability. Did a whole webinar on it. Because if you're making decisions in business and you're using these assessments, there are certain standards based on industrial and organizational psychologists that you should the standards of reliability and validity that you should use for decision making, high stakes decision. Can you use these instruments for inputs and for selection, for placement, those kind of things? For termination, never. You shouldn't use those tools, and it shouldn't be the only input, right? But as an input. And so what EQI does is it has 5 composite categories and 15 subscales that break down emotional intelligence into smaller bites. I'll use the example of the self-perception is one of the composites, one of the 5 composites. And in there, it's broken into those 3 subscales of self-regard, self-actualization, and emotional self-awareness. And so when you take the overall data set and you break it down into the composites and that many subscales, and then you see how well you performed against the norm, that's the data and the research, um, then you can find areas where you have your strengths, where you have challenges and opportunities for improvement, and where you can develop goals to improve. And so it's such a great tool. And when I would see it in healthcare, the folks coming straight from the OR, sometimes we were doing interventions for communication because there was just so much stress. How are they handling stress? And we could use that tool to help. And patterns develop in healthcare that people with big hearts, so they have very high empathy, maybe low assertiveness. Their empathy was so high they didn't want to disrupt things, and so they didn't want to argue, and so their assertiveness might have been lower. But it's a temporary condition, and this is why your self-awareness is a temporary condition, because eventually just suppressing all of that, all of the expectations and those kind of things, and not getting your needs met because you're empathetic for others and you just want to keep peace, can result in strange things. Impulse control, so that they're making impulsive decisions, or maybe they have a behavior issue, or they have some kind of outburst because for so long their empathy was very high, assertiveness low. They weren't expressing themselves and their needs. And so how long can someone go? Their stress tolerance was low at that point. Another measure is stress tolerance. It was low at that point. And so, it can result, when I talk about chunking these parts of emotional intelligence together, like we spoke of before, if you think of how this could result, you have very high empathy, low assertiveness, you're not expressing your needs clearly. Um, and the reason that you're not is you don't want to disrupt things. Empathy, you have a heart for other people, you're listening, understanding. Um, but by suppressing your own needs, not clearly articulating expectations and needs, your stress management starts to decrease. Your coping decreases until you have challenges with impulse control because you're not coping well. And so when we cluster and chunk these things together with, some patterns emerge. So EQI, by people taking that assessment, millions now taking it, by the way, and they've actually very intelligently, they're redoing the norm, because if the initial norm was 20 years ago, and it is a valid norm that's going to be reliable, then it needs to reflect what society's doing today,
Sure.
right? Because people change. So they're redoing the norm there. But when you look at different tools and validity and reliability, very strong. I saw the results of that because I saw literally transformations in people just by raising awareness. We generally, people want to improve. Generally, people want to grow. Um, Even helping people understand their strengths can be very helpful. There's a big focus with Clifton Strengths, Gallup Strengths on here are your strengths. But one of the things I learned that we can use in emotional intelligence is, once you know those, then you know what's most valuable to you, what you value most. Well, then you also know where your biggest triggers are, right? Inherently, if honesty is a very important value to you, and someone tells little white lies, or they just glaze over the truth,
Mm.
person's going to be in your trigger zone. You won't know why don't I like that person? I really, I don't understand. And so that's why I don't like them. If you value independence and someone's kind of needy, right? And independence is a big value. You want to let someone just take a task and run with it. It's a big value for you. And this person just keeps coming back for more and more instructions and directions. And I need to understand this better. That person could be in your trigger zone. I think it's very important to understand for your triggers, to understand where you value different aspects, even of emotional intelligence, and where you, if empathy is really important to you, if someone just seems indifferent, that person's going to be in your trigger zone. If problem solving is important to you, you're kind of a systematic thinker, and people do what you tell them, but they're not going to go fix things themselves. Be in your trigger zone. So now you take this and you apply it to leadership and leadership teams.
Mhm.
And you kind of see this dynamic. Then you add the dynamic of different generations and how they were raised and how they respond to different stimuli in the workplace. It becomes this very complex thing to work out. And so if you're not very intentional about yourself, if you're not aware of those 15 subscales in emotional intelligence, and you're not working toward getting better in those areas where, sustaining where you're strong, but getting better in those areas for growth. And then learning that yourself helps you to spot it in other people, right? You
Mhm.
spot it in other people, then how much better a leader can you be specifically for them?
Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to tackle those that may be skeptical about this whole measuring emotion thing because they're not emotional people and they don't want to go down that path. So, James, number one, have you worked with people who were skeptical in the beginning? And did you see a turnaround with them? Did they come around? And what were those results like once they adopted or adapted this idea that they can become better when it comes to EI?
So what's great, that despite skepticism, initial skepticism, the results are the same. So if they're initially skeptical, well, I don't do emotion. I'm like, well, okay, that's the way you process information. That's great. How's it? And this is a coaching. How's it working for you in your relationships? Right? They've already told you they don't want to deal with emotions, right? Relationships or emotions. So, and how you deal with them, right? So the results can be the same. Maybe they're stressed out. Maybe they have time management challenges. Maybe they have challenges with empathy. Maybe they're misunderstood. Maybe they're great problem solvers, but they're not that assertive, you know. Or on the other end, maybe they have low empathy. They just don't consider the feelings of others and everything is data based. They're analytical, right? Um, but when you start asking those questions, okay, how does this show up in your life? When you say that relationships are important, emotion is not important, what kind of feedback have you heard? What are you getting? Would people agree with you? And if they agree with you, do they like it? Is you develop these conversations with them. And the great thing, and this is what I think is so important about a valid and reliable tool, is because it is a valid tool, it is a reliable tool. We've got the statistics to support it, the data to support it. Then it's going to have results because it is an accurate assessment. So those will be the areas you need to work in. It might not be where you want to work. That may be a hard area for you, but it will be the area where you could use the most improvement.
Mhm.
And then I go back to, this is a self-assessment. So even though there are questions that help with validity and reliability and consistency, this is your assessment of yourself and your own mirror. It's a self-assessment. And so if using this tool, so well, this is kind of the results based on data and your perceptions. So it's hard
Yeah.
for someone to come and say that it's not, I don't believe in this at all. So I've actually seen, I think some of those hard cases are some of the best.
Mhm.
You know this in general, some people are coachable and some are not. Maybe they don't want to change. They're not interested in changing. And that's okay if you raise their awareness. I've helped people and then they come back months later. Hey, you know what? I've been thinking about this thing. Hopefully they'll come back with a performance improvement plan, right? But they come back later because now they've heard it. And so, cognitively, how do they go through that if they're systematic? Well, I heard this, these people are telling me it's not working for me. I don't know what to do different. This is just me. So, And I've had those people show up too. Oh, this is me. I had one lady, I coached in healthcare. She said, well, I'm just like my dad. That's what this says. It's great. I said, okay, it is right now. Is that where you want to be? Is that what you want to show? Is that how you want to interact? Were there things about dad that you thought would be better if dad could have done this differently? And that specific person increased her emotional intelligence score, which you can do. Cognitive intelligence and IQ, you're set at about 17 years old. That's about it. Research shows that. EI can increase. And so increased her overall EI score by like 40 points.
Wow.
And just life changing, her awareness. And so we don't have to respond with fight and flight reactions. We can take a breath. We can use that 6 to 10 seconds for our reasoning to go from our amygdala to the frontal neocortex. That's why we're told to count to 10. We can take that time to do that. And then emotional intelligence gives us sometimes the vocabulary to have these conversations, to have these thoughts, to think about things, even among teams and leadership. It gives us the vocabulary to talk about these things, to put these feelings to words. How are we impacting others? How does this impact me? And how might I want to change this? One of the greatest questions I love, we all learn from Dr. Phil. How's it working for you?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
those people who initially are skeptical, I've had mixed results. If they're skeptical to the point that they don't want to change, well, you can't help them. They have to make that decision for change themselves. If they do, and you've raised this awareness and you work in certain areas, I've seen great change. I've seen great in employee engagement scores for people that were having a hard time because they didn't realize that this is how they were showing up. They didn't realize that these decisions were impacting others because they never asked.
Right.
You know, and so
It's
I see
so
so much growth. What one lady said, I like to go back and read testimonials. One lady says it was so great. I was able to come to work without crying. And
wow.
so, talk about impact, why that was so formative to me, a retired military officer, and then you go into this incubator for emotional intelligence coaching and consulting, and during the middle of COVID, and that's kind of shaped where we are.
That's beautiful. It's been such a journey for you. So, as we get to the back half of our conversation, I've got a couple of things left. One, I would love for you to talk a little bit about your certification program and who the best clients are for that. So, someone is already adapted, loves EI, really wants to take it to the next level. So, talk about that program. And then, of course, I have a veteran question for you because I couldn't let you leave without that.
That's great. Well, wouldn't want to miss it. So, certification program is, I tell people, if you want to invest in the most impactful training that you could possibly have for your organization, number one, invest in emotional intelligence, but get one of your people certified in administering this tool, debriefing it, and coaching emotional intelligence. Whether that's an external consultant and they use that, or an internal consultant, and you use it in leader development programs, whether internal or external. It's 16 hours, 2 days live. And so you sign up, you get access to an LMS, and then you take online modules, and then you come into this live virtual environment like we're in now, and you're learning about the history of emotional intelligence. You're learning about this model, the validity, reliability. You're learning how to administer it, and then you're learning how to interpret what the reports and the information provide, and then how that translates into helping your folks with growth and development. How to set smart goals so that something practical. We take these ideas of emotional intelligence and then we apply them to you, and then we deconstruct where your strengths are and where your challenges may be, and then we co-create this plan for development that can really be impactful in your life, in your work engagements, in your home engagements. increasing overall happiness. You know, one of the measures is positivity. Are you positive? You know, and here are the things that contribute to that, right? So, um, uh, the training is 2 days, some pre-modules that you do, and then a test at the end, and then you have a license to be able to administer and use this great tool that, like I said, I saw proven in a healthcare environment, a pretty intense healthcare environment. I was sold on it. I love to see the development of people. You know, I love to see them grow. I love to see them come back and talk about the changes. And um, so that's the certification program. It's not a difficult program. There are some communication aspects to it because you have to be able to juggle the different subscales, right? What does this mean when you're interpreting? And then for me as a military officer, learning about this, I had to shift from being a mentor to a coach and more asking questions instead
Yeah.
of telling, right? So it, remain curious about the data, try to understand from the client what this means and how they completed this and what the results show, and then co-create something. Sometimes their biggest deficit in emotional intelligence is not where they want to work.
Mm.
You can't mentor them and say, hey, right here, that's your problem.
Yeah.
Nothing's a problem. It's an opportunity, and go where they want to go because it needs to be something that's dear enough to them that they're willing to work in that space.
Yeah.
So the certification can be signed up for at my website, leaderei.com, and then after people sign up there and they enroll, then they'll get signed up in a learning management system. We'll go through a couple days of training. They'll take their test. They're certified. Then they can purchase and use the tool.
Okay, that's beautiful. So leaderei.com is the best way to find that program and sign up with James to get certified. That's fantastic. I really enjoyed our conversation today. So, last question for you. What's the one big thing that you brought with you through your military experience into the work that you do now?
A couple of things. It's so hard for me to one, but I'll try to keep it at one for you for time. I think it was my exposure to so many different cultures, so many different people. And so because of that, I didn't come in with a bunch of bias. I came in with, hey, these are all people that bring experiences of their own. They contribute in the world, and I need to listen. I need to understand them. I need to understand how we interact. And so I think, along with some of the leadership aspects, some of the aspects of being an intelligence officer that are process oriented, uh, I really brought just that exposure to so many different cultures, so many different, and that's within the United States and when I deployed, right? So many different cultures and that cultural awareness to where I wasn't very surprised when someone came in the office to be able to help, you know.
Mhm.
And as a leader, regardless of the generation, I'm trying to read a little bit. I'm trying to understand where they're coming from, but I'm not going to make a judgment on even on stereotypes for a generation. And so I think that the biggest thing that I learned from the military was not to quickly judge people, but to listen, to be curious. That curiosity about where they're coming from, where they've been, what they need.
That's awesome. So, James, thank you again for your time today. Everyone knows they can go to leaderei.com to learn more about your programs. Is there another way that you would like for people to connect with you if they have questions or want to learn more?
Sure, they can directly email me at james@leaderei.com.
Okay, beautiful. James, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an amazing conversation. You may have to come back because I have so many more questions for you.
I'd love to come back. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And that's all the time we have for today. If you found value in this conversation, share it with a fellow entrepreneur, a veteran, or a Houston leader ready to grow. Be sure to follow, rate, and review the show. It helps us reach more bold business minds just like yours in your business, your leadership, and your legacy are built one intentional step at a time. So stay inspired, stay focused, and keep building the business and the life you deserve.